South Korea and the United States have wrapped up their second round of negotiations on sharing the costs for stationing American troops in the country, while Seoul has partially shouldered the expenses since 1991. Some 28,500 American soldiers are now deployed in South Korea as part of efforts to deter the North. Well, Seoul is reportedly looking to secure an early deal to avoid any tough bargaining in case Donald Trump returns to the White House. Well, under the former president, Washington demanded more than a five-fold increase in Seoul's payment to $5 billion. The current six-year deal saw Seoul fork out $1 billion for 2021 and raising the payment every year in line with its defense spending. Well, the next round of talks is expected to take place in Washington. And for more, let's bring in CNA's senior correspondent Lim Yoon-suk in Seoul. So, Yoon-suk, tell us a little bit more about why these two sides have to begin talks early.
Well, South Korean officials here have not said why, but there are local reports who are saying that it is because the two sides want to strike a deal before the November presidential election in the United States. Now, South Korea is worried that if former U.S. President Donald Trump wins the election, he will again try to get South Korea to pay much more for having the U.S. troops based here in South Korea. Now, according to reports then, the Trump administration was asking South Korea to pay as much as $5 billion US, and they had a very difficult time. And, in the end, they were not able to reach a deal, which meant that thousands of South Koreans working on U.S. bases were placed on unpaid leave. And it was really only after the Biden administration came into power that they reached this deal. And like you said, it was a six-year deal that took effect in 2021. And South Korea then agreed on paying $1.02 billion US, which was only about 13.9% increase from the previous year. Now, recently, we've heard Mr. Trump talk about how wealthy South Korea is and how, South Korea should be paying more, and how the Biden administration had agreed on such a low payment. And so South Koreans are worried that if a deal is not reached before November, a similar thing can happen again.
Well, Yoon-suk, the U.S. elections is just around the corner in November. So it feels like from now to November, there really isn't a lot of time in terms of trying to conclude these talks. So what's at stake in these negotiations? And how might a failure, for instance, to reach a new agreement actually impact the U.S.-South Korea alliance?
Well, I don't think anyone's talking about a failure for now. I mean, analysts and also some officials here are saying they're not worried because they think that under the Biden administration, they feel that two sides will be able to reach some kind of a deal. And one thing for sure they say is that, this will not have an impact on the relations between the two countries, and that the U.S.-South Korea alliance goes back decades and it remains strong. And in fact, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol said something similar, reiterated this at his recent press conference earlier this month, saying that South Korea, the U.S. alliance, received strong support from both the American government and the people, and also from both parties in the U.S. Congress and from the current administration, and that it will remain unchanged. And I think that is the feeling among the South Korean government and also possibly the United States.
But let's talk about the current geopolitical landscape, though. I mean, including we've got the threat from North Korea, we've got competition with China. How are all of those factors going to influence the talks and the U.S. approach to burden sharing these costs?
Well, many analysts here are saying that the presence of the U.S. troops stationed here in South Korea does not just benefit South Korea, but also serves the U.S. national security interest of maintaining the strategic balance in Northeast Asia, that is really to keep a check on Beijing. Now, if the United States did remove its troops from South Korea, the U.S. front lines and this extended deterrence that they talk about would have to retreat as far back as Japan, and that wouldn't really suit the U.S. And its policy. And also, because of this threat from North Korea, it means that South Korea would then have no choice but to find different ways to defend itself. And that could mean arming itself with its own nuclear weapons. And that is something that the United States does not want South Korea to do. And that's why there are analysts and officials here who say that, all this rhetoric and comments that Mr. Trump have been making, saying that he will pull out the U.S. troops, was really just all election talk for the U.S. domestic audience. And they don't think that U.S. President Donald Trump, if he goes into the White House, will be able to do that because he will also need the U.S. Congress to approve this. And it's very unlikely that he'll be able to get that. And so right now, there is a lot of talk, from Mr. Trump and also a lot of worries here in South Korea. But many are optimistic that the two sides will be able to reach some kind of a deal very soon.
And we'll certainly be looking out for that. Thanks so very much, CNA Lim Yun-suk in Seoul.